the reason the Second Amendment is in place, if you go back, the right to own firearms wasn't created by the Second Amendment. That was an ordained right that our founding fathers thought was inherent prior to writing the Constitution. They put the Second Amendment in place to block the government from taking away, from infringing upon our rights to have guns to protect ourselves. And Lauren mentioned this. It's something that we've seen over the last few years. As Democrats up here in Washington, some of the same Democrats who are trying to take away more rights from law-abiding citizens to defend themselves were the same Democrats who were working to defund the police just a year and a half ago. We're working to help elect DAs in cities all across America that let criminals out of jail. And what happened? Should we be shocked? We predicted this. Crime has gone out of control in those cities because they took away the ability for police to do their job, because they stopped putting people in jail for crimes. And the message went out to criminals that you can do whatever you want with no consequence. And so as that crime got out of control, what did we see happen as a result? We saw more American citizens that never owned a gun before exercising their right to go and buy firearms to protect themselves and their families. If local Democrats were going to defund their police, they were going to have guns to defend themselves and their families. And I'm talking millions of new gun owners, millions of new gun owners. And so when you see what's happening this week, the bills that Democrats are bringing, as Thomas pointed out, you know, there are so many unconstitutional provisions. California had a law to go to 18 to 21 to buy a firearm, and the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals ruled it unconstitutional. The idea that you can take away somebody's rights without due process, as the bill that Speaker Pelosi is bringing to the floor under the name Red Flag, is unconstitutional. It violates multiple sections of our Constitution that give Americans the right to due process. And why are they doing this? They're doing it because they don't want to focus on the root of the problem. We've offered time and time again legislation to get to the root of the problem. Why are young kids committing more violent acts? Why shouldn't we be asking that question? Why shouldn't we be working on solving that problem as opposed to the Democrats' approach of just taking away more guns? As Joe Biden the other day said, now it's the handgun they want to go after next. It doesn't end. They want to continue taking away guns from law-abiding citizens. And there is no end to their thirst to do that. Let's focus on the root cause of the problem, like we focused as a nation after September 11th on connecting the dots to stop terrorist attacks before they happened. Some people say that couldn't have been done, and yet look at the result. Thank God, knock on wood, no more terrorist attacks since that focus was put in place. We should be focusing more on identifying who are the kids that are going to cause the problems. Many of these young kids know who they are beforehand. They just don't know to tell authorities, to tell law enforcement, like was the case in Berkeley just a few weeks ago. Berkeley, California. Students found out somebody else was trying to blow up their school with bombs. And they went and arrested the student before he did it. And as I've pointed out a few times, I can't say it enough because the mainstream media still won't report this story, but just a few days ago in West Virginia, there was a man with an AR-15 who went to shoot up a bunch of kids at a birthday party and a graduation. And it was a woman with a handgun. As Joe Biden's talking about going after handguns, she had a handgun legally and she pulled it out and took down the shooter. And later we found out that shooter was a felon who under current law is not allowed to have that gun, and yet he got the gun. He didn't care what the law said. But if they had their way and she wasn't able to have her gun, we would have read about that because it would have been a tragic shooting. And luckily it wasn't, because there was a citizen who had a gun and knew what to do to protect not only herself, but to protect all those young kids around her. And that happens more across this country every day than people want to acknowledge. It's why so many Americans are exercising that right to have a gun to protect themselves as Democrats are working to defund the police and let out hardened criminals. So let's focus on the root of the problem, but let's not take away the ability for people to defend themselves, exercising their constitutional rights.